from what I've seen in my experience, email, if you're a pure play e-commerce shop, makes up from 10 to 30% of total revenue, actually.
Hey, podcast listener, you're about to discover insider tips, tricks, and secrets to making more sales and converting more prospects into customers with email marketing. For more information about the Email Marketing Podcast or the Autoresponder Guide, go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Yeah, it's Johnny McIntyre here, the Autoresponder Guy, and it's time for episode 39 of the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, where you'll discover tactics and strategies to increase your email profits by 25 to 100% in 90 days or less without spending more on advertising. So the point here is to give you actionable things that you can walk away with today and apply in your business on anything that relates or revolves around email marketing, whether it's the landing page or the email copywriting or the ideas or the storytelling or the products or the positioning or any of these different things. The idea is I want you to walk away today with an idea that you can plug into your business and get a boost, whether it's 10%, 20%, or 100%. And this is very, very possible. Now today I'll be talking to Wang. Now X is his real name, or it's the name he goes by anyway, and it feels a bit like I'm talking to a secret agent, which I talk a little bit about in today's interview. Now X specializes in email marketing for e-commerce stores. So he works with e-commerce owners to set up all the different things that an e-commerce store might need as far as email marketing goes. This could be typical things like an abandonment sequence, or it could be, I guess, lesser known tactics and strategies for boosting the response that I hadn't heard of, and you probably haven't either, even if you're an e-commerce store owner. So there's a lot of like gold nuggets in today's episode for the e-commerce store owner, but also for any email marketer, because whether you're doing it for e-commerce or whether you're doing it for information marketing or whether you're doing it for ebooks or small businesses, all these concepts are all very similar. It all comes back to understanding the market, using empathy, making offers regularly, solving problems, keeping in touch, all that sort of stuff. It's all the same thing. We're just looking in each episode of this podcast at different ways to apply the same concepts. So even if you're not an e-commerce guy or girl, this podcast will still have value, because the more you hear these concepts, the more likely you are to actually get around to implementing them. Because often I think it's a study that says we need to be exposed to something 7 times before we remember it. I think that's from advertising. But it's kind of like, when you've heard something before, maybe you've read a book about a certain idea that could be a marketing idea, could be an idea about anything. And the first time you hear it, you're like, well, that's cool. The second time, the third time, and finally after hearing it say 6 or 7 times, it clicks. Somehow it sinks into some part of the brain, and then you do it. So anyway, that's today. E-commerce, email marketing. What exactly? Well, it's going to be about the 80-20 of e-commerce email marketing. So X is going to lay out a step-by-step game plan for an e-commerce store owner on what they can do to set up email marketing for their site. So this is about as actionable as it gets. And just so you know, from everything I've gathered, all the research I've done, and the people I've talked to, email marketing can make up anywhere from 10 to 30% of an e-commerce store's revenue. Okay, so if you're doing 6 figures right now with your store per year, by setting up the different things that we talk about in this episode, you could go from $100,000 to $110,000 to $130,000 per year. So this is serious stuff. To get the show notes for this episode of the McMethod Email Marketing Podcast, go to themcmethod.com/39. Now, before we get into the interview, I've got one listener question today. It's a good one. The question is, what's a good balance between push and pull marketing? Now, the reason I think this is a great question is usually people fall too far on one side or the other. They either pitch way too hard, like the internet marketing, spammers do. Pitch, never give any value, and it wears people out. It works, but it burns the list out. So it makes it difficult to have a long-term relationship with that list. Then you've got the people who don't pitch at all. It's just all content, and they never pitch. And that means they never make any sales. And they wonder why. They're being so nice. They're giving away all this free stuff. And what they end up with is a list of freeloaders. So at what point, pulling would be like content marketing. That would be the example there. And pushing would be being aggressive. Okay? So here's what I think. It all depends on the context, on the nature of the people on the list. For example, if they're cold leads that have no idea who the hell you are, they don't know what you're about, and they're probably very skeptical of you. Now, this depends on the industry. If you're in the internet marketing industry, you're going to get cold leads on that list who've been through the ringer. They know what to expect, and they're going to be very skeptical of you until you win them over. So if you pitch them too hard at the outset, and they have no idea who you are, they're going to scare you off. So I've noticed that doing the daily email strategy that I use, it works great on warm leads, people who've been to my site and listened to my podcast, but it doesn't work anywhere near as well on, say, cold traffic from Facebook. And I think the reason is that people coming from Facebook, they don't know who I am, they don't know my podcast, they're not sold on John McIntyre yet. So when I come out of the gate, guns blazing, trying to pitch them on the McIntyre method every day, it just doesn't go over so well because these people have been, like I said, they've been through the ringer. All right, so you got to understand the context. You could go into, you might get a different response in a different industry, say for a small businesses. If you're talking to, say, CEOs who don't really like replying to emails, they might not even check their email inbox that often. They're extremely busy. If you're sending emails all the time, being very aggressive, it might not work either. It all depends. Whereas if you've got someone who's checking their emails and they're all about inbox zero and that kind of thing, maybe they'd be happy receiving daily emails and how aggressive you can be. So if you're going on cold traffic, you need to do a little bit more pull marketing, more of really selling them on your value before you start pitching them. So pulling them into your world and then pushing hard. So I hope this makes sense. It's a lot of times with marketing, conversion rates, and all these things, the important part is to understand the context. It's all about context. There's no tactical strategy that works every time in every situation. You always have to figure out what's the context right now. When people sign up to my list, when they get involved with my content, why, what mindset are they in when that happens? And then you plug in a strategy or something you can use, like an autoresponder or the aggressive stuff or the non-aggressive, all that sort of stuff. You plug in that stuff after you figured out the context, after you've taken the time to understand what your prospects are all about. So as for what's a good balance, there isn't really any perfect balance. That's the problem. You've got to take the time to go and figure out what is the context. If it's cold, then do a little bit more pull marketing, at least at the outset, at least initially. But if these people have, they're sold on you, they know who you are, they love your content, they've been through your site, maybe you have a podcast, then you can be a bit more aggressive, and you can be okay about it. This is going to go over in different industries. It's going to change from industry to industry to industry. People on my list, they're marketers. They're always checking their emails, right? They work online, so it's a great fit. But you're going to get other people who maybe they don't like checking their emails. Maybe they don't check their email more than once a week. So I hope this makes sense. That's enough of that. Let's go get into this interview with Mr. X Wang and find out what this faux secret agent has to say about e-commerce, email marketing. It's John McIntyre here, the autoresponder guy. I'm here with X Wang from Essence of Email. And yes, that is it's kind of his real name. X. I like it. I told him he sounds like he's from Triple X. I don't know if you've seen that movie or X-Men or Ecstasy. I'm sure we'll talk about that in just a minute. X specializes in email marketing for e-commerce stores, just like Ezra Firestone from episode 14 of the Email Marketing Podcast. Now, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different to Ezra. Ezra had some 3 steps that you could do for e-commerce. What X is going to talk about is the 80-20 of e-commerce email marketing. So this is kind of the most potent tactics that you can kind of walk away from this podcast and implement for your store. There's going to be tons of other stuff you can do, but this is the 80-20, the place where you're going to get the biggest win when it comes to email marketing for e-commerce stores. So it's going to be good. How you going today, X?
I'm doing fantastic, John.
It just cracks me up when I say, how you going today, X? I feel like I'm talking to a secret agent or something.
Absolutely. Do you know the song All My Exes Live in Texas? It's an American song, so maybe not, but I get flack for it all the time.
And you're from Texas, right?
I am. In the West Coast right now, but originally from Texas.
That's perfect, man. That's awesome. All right, before we get into this 80-20 checklist, tell the listener a bit about who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been working in the agency world for the past few years and primarily in email marketing, specifically for e-commerce shops. So it's a little bit of a different spin than perhaps some of the SaaS email marketing or just B2B email marketing. So it's been pretty much my life in the past few years, and I know way too much about it, even the technical side, which will really bore people when I sit down to dinner and start spewing about email marketing. Yep. But essentially, working with clients who are in that space, primarily small to medium e-commerce shops right now, I find that's also the place where I can provide the most value and really get them to either start email marketing if they don't have a program in place or improve upon their existing program.
Okay. Now, if someone's listening, if the listener has an e-commerce store and they're not using email marketing, what can they expect if they were to implement this checklist? What sort of surprises or good benefits are going to come if they set up some of the things you're going to talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. And if they are not doing anything right now, they need to start. And one of the biggest things I find that's the biggest roadblock for people starting is that they think it's really, really overwhelming. And I'm sure you've come across the same thing, John.
Okay, so how do you get past that? Because this is just some stuff that will probably come up in a minute. But how do you, when someone says, "Oh, it's just going to be a pain in the ass, it's too much work"?
Great question. So, from what I've seen in my experience, email, if you're a pure play e-commerce shop, makes up from 10 to 30% of total revenue, actually. The 30 is on the high end, of course, but usually you can expect probably around 10% on the low end and maybe even more than that.
Okay, so 10 to 30% boost in bottom line revenue by implementing some good email marketing.
To clarify the numbers there a little bit. So 10 to 30% I've seen with a mature email marketing program, that's 10 to 30% of total rev from pure play e-commerce shops.
Very interesting. All right, well, let's get into it, man. We've got 7 points to cover. We'll do our best to get through all of them. Let's check it out, man. What's point number one? What's step number one of 80/20 e-commerce email marketing?
Absolutely. So number one is shopping cart abandonment. And if you're in the e-commerce space, you've heard this all day long probably, but there's a reason for that because shopping cart abandonment is across all of the different retailers, different industries that I've worked with, it is the most effective email on a per delivered email basis.
Okay.
And I'm sure you've heard the stats, 70% shopping cart abandonment rate on average for e-commerce. And it is one of those emails that may be daunting to implement, but now that there's a lot more technology in terms of just plug and play with your email service provider and your shopping cart, there's really no reason why you shouldn't get it up. And again, I think going back towards what I mentioned earlier is that even if you have something basic up, it's better than nothing at all. I've seen shopping cart abandonment emails that are literally one paragraph and a button saying, hey, come back and shop with us with no products featured, no nothing. And those have performed well as well. So I think the key point here is let's get something up, shopping cart abandonment. Usually in terms of the number of touch points, usually you want to keep it 3 or under. And I say a good place to start is a 2-touch series for shopping cart abandonment.
Give me an example. Like, give me a quick, simple email that I could send out for the cart abandonment email.
Yep, absolutely. So in terms of copy, for example, in your subject line, say, hey, don't forget your order or order reminder, or you still have something in your cart, something along those lines in terms of the subject line. And then in terms of the actual content, yeah, if you have the capability, a lot of technology nowadays do, then you want to feature prominently the actual product they left in their shopping cart or products, and then saying, hey, just come back and shop with us, have a shop now button centered. And that's really all you really need to get it off the ground.
Okay. So that's very simple. So that's number one. What's number two?
Sure. So number two is, and I think Ezra actually mentioned it in the podcast you did with him, but number two is an overlay capture on site. So you're seeing these pop up, excuse the pun, all over the place these days. And there's a reason for that because it is very, very effective for capturing email addresses and also converting them. So a lot of people who come to your site, especially if they're first-time visitors, and the bounce rate is fairly high for e-commerce site. And you don't want to be spending all this money to drive traffic to try to acquire a customer only to have them leave and bounce off the site and never see you again. With the email overlay capture, it actually plays 2 roles here. One, you're able to capture a significant portion. In my experience, I've seen anywhere from 3 to 15% of the bouncing customers being captured. So you can have their email address to communicate with them later on, which ultimately will extend that lifetime value of that customer. And 2, just in terms of the actual follow-up emails coming directly after the site overlay, those can be very, very effective. And usually how people do this is they offer an incentive to sign up and give their email address, whether that's X% off or a free gift with purchase, etc. And that way the contact has an incentive to give your email address, and they also are expecting a follow-up email to come through, which ultimately is going to help your conversion numbers.
Is this a pop-up, or are you calling it an overlay capture? So let's say I go to your site, somecommercesite.com. What's happening when I get that? Is this a pop-up?
It is in essence a pop-up. There's ways to do it so that it doesn't get blocked with most pop-up blockers. You can configure it from really, really simple to very advanced logic. So To start, the most basic way would be saying, including some logic in there, saying, hey, once a new visitor comes to site, then wait for, say, 5 seconds before showing this overlay and then cookie them. So in the next, say, 90 days, if they visit the site again, they won't see that overlay.
Yep.
But there's also ways to really program that logic depending on your development capabilities or if you're using a third-party vendor on what they offer. I've seen some third-party vendors that offer mouse gesture tracking. So essentially, if you're moving your mouse to exit the site, then that's when the overlay capture serves up.
So we're basically just talking about a way to get them onto the list with a pop-up type of device or software, and then you're offering them 10% off. If you can make some sort of offer, so instead of just sign up for the newsletter, you're finding that making some sort of offer like sign up for 15% off is going to get the best result.
Absolutely. You can do it without an offer. And I've seen it done fairly successfully without the offer, but in general, you're going to see a much greater return, both in terms of the capture rate as well as the conversion rate with the follow-up email if you're offering some sort of incentive. Coupons work really well, one-time use coupons or more generic coupon. And I've seen numbers for overlay capture, the email following up with that, upwards towards $4 per delivery email. Of course, that's on the high end, but that's kind of a range of the potential.
Okay, interesting, man. Oh, let's go on to the next one, number 3.
Great. So number 3 is optimizing your transactional emails, particularly your order and shipping confirmation. So pretty much if you're a e-commerce retailer, you'll be sending order confirmation and shipping confirmation to your new customers. Now, those emails are categorized as transactional emails versus marketing emails, and there's some more rules around transactional emails versus marketing emails and laws around that. But in general, at least for the United States and a lot of the English-speaking countries, you can have a minimal amount of marketing message as long as the majority of that transactional message is focused on that transaction. So what this means is that we have a lot of opportunity to include some marketing messages here. And the reason why it's so potent is because when you're looking at the engagement rates for order confirmation and shipping confirmation, you're seeing really, really high open rates and click rates. And for example, I normally see with order and shipping confirmations north of 50% easily for open rates and 30% or more in terms of the click rates, and that's click to open. And so you're getting these 2 touches of emails that everyone's opening, everyone's clicking through, and also, these are your very, very hot customers. So they just purchased from you. They're feeling the warm and fuzzies. If you hit them with the right offer or the right recommendations for products, for example, then you have a pretty high chance of converting them again and getting that repurchase in short time frame.
Okay, so how do you figure out? How do you optimize? They order one, product A. How do you know what? I'm guessing you're going to offer them a similar product, such as people who bought this also bought this.
Yep, that would be the ideal scenario is with a product recommendation engine. Unfortunately, you do have to shell out some dough for that. So finding the right vendor for which product recommendations technologies to use
How much
in
do they
your
cost?
emails.
How much could you spend on something like that?
They can go up towards the thousands of dollars a month.
Wow, okay.
That's more on the enterprise level. There's probably some smaller vendors there. That being said, though, and this again goes back to kind of the overarching theme here is you can start basic and then ramp up. For example, I've seen success where people literally have, here's some other recommended products and have static products in there. So like 3 or 4 static products. So you can start with something like that. It's not ideal, but ultimately it would still be better than not having any recommendations. Right. And the other thing too is you want at least 1 or 2 other solid calls to action. So even if it means, and this frustrates me to no end, but I've seen a lot of these order confirmation emails where it shows my order and there's no branding, there's no, not even a text link to the site. And even just adding 1 or 2 text links, say in the context of the email saying, hey, thank you for ordering from example ecommerceshop.com, you can just link that up. And even that can get a lot more click-throughs than if you don't have the click-through elements and calls to action.
So what I'm seeing here is that the real benefit to this is that, of course, there's a perfect way to do it with the product recommendation engine, and it's going to be like this with all these different actions that people can do. But if they're not doing any of this and they just start doing it, even if they do it poorly, or even if they just do a good job instead of a great job, they're going to be adding percentage points to their bottom line.
Absolutely, John, and you nailed that on the head.
Okay, great. So let's go to number 4 then, the reorder trigger. What's that? Sure.
So the reorder trigger, this is applicable to particular for consumables. So if you're selling anything that is replenishable, say it's vitamins or beauty products, etc., then this will be a really, really good trigger to have. If you're selling, $4,000 motors or something, it may not be as applicable. But for those of you who are selling replenishables, essentially a reorder trigger is a automated email that fires off X number of days after customers first purchased. And what this does is essentially you're trying to estimate based on the shipping date how long it takes for them to use up all the product, and then hit them with an email that's saying, hey, we noticed, you purchased this product X month ago and it's time to reorder. And I've seen some really good conversion rates off of that.
When you're selling supplements or some sort of consumable, you just calculate, well, they're going to use this up in 30 days, so we'll send them an email in 30 days to see if they're ready to buy another bottle.
Precisely. Yeah, it works beautifully with any consumables, replenishable items.
What do you do in a situation where, say, I'm selling a dietary supplement, and there's 30 pills, and you take a pill a day, and so it's obviously going to be gone in 30 days. I've always wondered that some people might take it every day for 2 weeks, and then they don't take it again, or maybe they skip a few days, and then they skip a few days here and there, and it actually takes them 45 days. So when you email them, you're 14 days too early. Is there any way to avoid those kind of problems, or is that just something that you have to kind of take in your stride?
Yeah, you kind of have to take that in stride. One thing I will mention is thinking through that, you may want to build a little bit of buffer in terms of the reorder time zone. And also what you want to do, and this boils down with all email marketing essentially, is you want to test, right? So maybe your theory is 35 days is the perfect timing. You run that trigger for a couple of weeks, and then you say, hey, let's shift to a 45-day time delay and see if that performs better. And maybe you see a 10% increase or something, and then clearly you would go with the longer delay in that case. So I'd say, yeah, to answer your question, it is something that you pretty much have to take in stride with the delay initially, and then test out of that and try to optimize it.
Right. So again, it's kind of a case of, you'll miss some people, but if you do it at all versus not doing it, you're going to be adding percentage points.
Absolutely. And also, again, the creative can be simple and the technology doesn't have to be super robust in the beginning.
Okay, cool. Let's go to the next one, this post-purchase series. This looks good. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the post-purchase series, and some people kind of conflate the post-purchase series with welcome series, etc. But the basic concept is once someone purchases from your store, then in line with what I was talking about earlier of capturing them at that ripe time just post-purchase, because as you skew further and further from the purchase date, your chances of repurchase goes down dramatically. I believe there's a lot of studies that say, hey, 90 days post-purchase is kind of the optimal period. And then after that, it's really, really dropping down. So with the post-purchase series, essentially you are leveraging that warm relationship with your customer to garner a repurchase. That's definitely one of the goals, which you can do this by saying, hey, the first email after they purchase is, hey, thank you for purchasing, which, you should do anyways, just from a brand perspective. And, my mother always taught me to say my thank yous. So one good thing you can do in that email too is to include a first-time purchaser coupon. And a lot of times you'll see people come back to the site and immediately use that coupon for another purchase.
Okay, so we're sending out coupons. I love this idea where you basically it's just remarketing to existing customers, where if they've already bought from you once, they're probably going to buy from you again. There's a lot of people that go, marketing consultants that'll say things. Basically, it costs far less to sell to an existing customer than it does to a new customer. So to acquire a new customer than it does to just sell to an existing one. So this is really, really cool stuff. And I'm sure there'd be so many different ways of doing this post-purchase series in terms of you go from coupons or, down to really deep, relevant stuff in the way that, say, I'm sure that Amazon's doing this, where you buy something and then they're giving you a customized recommendation based on some sort of algorithm they're crunching, based on what you've purchased. And I've heard, what's the book? I think it's The Power of Habit, where they talk about what Target was doing. It was based on the purchases that someone had made. This lady had been making over a few months. They sent her an offer for a discount on baby clothes or something like that. And because their algorithm had figured out that she was pregnant based on the purchases she'd been making up until that point. And what happened was her dad found the coupons thing before her daughter did. And so her dad freaked out, thinking, you can't send this kind of stuff to teenagers, like that's, or however old his daughter was. That's just rude. How do you know she's pregnant or not? And then it turns he was pregnant in the end as well, which is very funny. You can get really, really advanced with this stuff, can't you?
Absolutely. And that story always cracks me up. I think I've heard it circulating around the web for quite a bit now. But yeah, some of these big shops, they have just full-time data people in house and just crunching through it. So yeah, like you said, you can get really, really sophisticated. Like I said, a crawl, walk, run approach is generally the best to start off with crawling. And then as you build out the program, you can get really, really targeted with some really cool data stuff.
Absolutely, man. I get this quote from, it's always basically on my mind if it's not on my wall, from Facebook. And it's that move fast and break shit. And it's it's kind of like in business, you win far more if you're just moving really, really fast, trying a whole bunch of stuff, throwing a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, than if you go really carefully and try not to make any mistakes. So my suggestion is that people just get out there, and if they're not doing this, go and set it up. It's not going to be perfect, but once it's set up, then you can optimize it and improve it. So let's talk about the post-purchase series. What's this product review?
Yep. So the product review is, as I mentioned, with email for e-commerce. I mean, it's primarily remarketing and trying to get some conversions, but there's also other ways you can leverage that customer relationship. And the product review it could be part of your post-purchase series where you literally just ask your customers for product reviews. And this really helps both, making your customers, the ones that do read the email and do engage and leave a review, making them more ingrained with your brand, more engaged with it, but also just getting more product reviews for your site, which is something that's really inspiring for new visitors to site to convert, is when they see that there are many product reviews and seeing their peers comment on it. So it's just another way to leverage email to help out your e-commerce marketing program overall.
And the cool thing, too, I just thought about now is that while this stuff might be a pain in the ass to set up, and this is basically a big to-do list or checklist of work that people are going to have to do, once this stuff is set up, it's automated. You can go away and take a holiday to the Bahamas or to Thailand or a beach or whatever, and all these systems, this marketing automation will just keep bumping those conversion rates for you.
Absolutely. And that's why I want to focus on kind of the autoresponder, the automated part in this 80/20. There's more you can do, and having a normal promotional emails requires more work, but also having that calendar is useful as well. But in terms of sitting back after you set it up and having it add more dollars in your bank account, it's definitely really good.
Okay, cool. So what about this last one, post-purchase series survey?
Sure. So this is another way to leverage your contacts without asking in particular for a purchase, especially with small e-commerce shops. A lot of times their core advantage is that relationship with the customer and really listening to customer feedback and surveying them and improving the services and offerings based on that. So using that time post-purchase and setting up a survey email, sending to your customers to get their feedback is something that's really helpful just to your business as a whole if you're looking to interact with customers and really use their feedback to up your brand and your product.
Absolutely, man. I'm always telling people to do the survey stuff. I reckon the surveys are some of the most valuable things you can do when it comes to preparing for your marketing. All right, let's do resends and emails, number 6.
Sure. So the previous ones I've talked about are primarily more automated items. With the resends or remails, people use different terms for this. It is essentially leveraging the work that you've already done and then making it work for you. So let me clarify on what I mean there. So for most email marketing programs, outside of the automated triggers, you're also going to have a calendar of promotions where you're sending these one-off promotional emails. Say it's Valentine's Day, 25% off flowers or something. And with those, one of the challenges is, especially with smaller shops or even medium-sized shops, is they are crunched for resources, right? Their design team, their coding team, their marketing team is really strapped for resources. And so it's hard to create a lot of the normal one-off promo emails. And oftentimes you create one, you send it out, and then you never use it again. So with remails essentially and you don't want to do remails on every single email, but you want to pick your very effective sales. So your bigger sales of the year, say Cyber Monday or Black Friday or some other sale. And basically you're taking that, you're tweaking some text elements in there or even leaving it essentially the same, but you're resending it again a couple days later, usually 1 or 2 days later, and you're sending it to people. And there's some debate about this, but generally you're sending it to people who did not open the first email. And what this does is it really leverages the initial work you put into creating the email, both on the design and the coding end, and it uses that again. And what I've seen is even though you're sending to people who did not open, you can see some really, really good results with remails. Sometimes the remails actually outperform the original email. Not often, but I've seen it happen before. And it really just adds to your bottom line there without duplicating effort.
Okay, fantastic. I love that. So just kind of set up those systems so you can just keep mailing the same thing out. All right, let's talk about number 7. This is the final one. We're going good, man. We're doing good on time. Let's do number 7, email template architecture, and then we'll wrap it up.
Fantastic. So with email template architecture, it's a topic that could be really, really deep, but I'll just give you a couple of best practices here. In general, as an overview, the reason why we have to pay attention to the architecture of emails is, one, of course, optimizing it for conversions, but two, also because even though Google recently, in the last couple of days, released an update where they're automatically loading images, for most part, most email browsers and clients are not loading images by default. Rather, they have images off by default, as you'll probably notice. And that's why with email in particular, you need to really pay attention to the different architectural elements. So I'm going to give you 2.5 critical elements in your email template. So for e-commerce shops, number 1 is include a header and or footer navigation. So what I've seen is there's a lot of newsletters people send out that just are, text-based, maybe show a product or two, and maybe have their logo in there, which is all good. But I've seen upwards to 20 to 25% of all clicks on an email on the header or the footer navigation. And basically what these are is, if you think of the global navigation on your site, say on your website, on your header, say category 1, category 2, category 3, you want to include a portion of that in your email in that prime real estate up top. 2 reasons for this. 1, it's in that prime real estate, there's more opportunity for them to click through. And 2, when you're sending an email promo, sometimes the promo itself, the main messaging in the email, may not be that relevant to everybody. So for the people in the case where that's not that relevant, they still have an opportunity to still click through on the categories that are relevant to them. And thus you're capturing more clicks than if you didn't have the footer or header navigation elements.
Okay, so it's interesting because I do a lot of text emails and I don't do any, HTML stuff with menus or images or anything like that. So you're saying that with e-commerce, what works really well is actually having those header and that footer in there because people are going to relate to these e-commerce emails as though they're a website, not an email.
Precisely. And with email and websites, it's obviously a different structure there and different things to pay attention to. But yeah, in essence, they do engage very heavily with header and footer navigation.
Okay, interesting. Fantastic, man. Well, we're going a little bit over time here, but that's good. So we had 7 points here. Number 1, set up a cart abandonment sequence. Number 2, have an overlay capture, more a pop-up kind of thing. Number 3, optimize your order and shipping confirmations. Number 4, set up a reorder trigger. So after 45 days, send them another email and tell them to buy something again to restock. Number 5, set up post-purchase series. So you've got a thank you and a first-time coupon. To bring them back, you ask them to review the product as well, and then you also survey them. And these are in different emails, a separate call to action, a single call to action in every email. Number 6, get some resends and emails. So see if you can set up some emails or remails, so you don't have to create single emails every time there's a new promotion. And then finally, that email architecture, which is where you're setting up those menus in the top and the bottom, because people are going to click those links. Is that everything?
That about wraps it up.
Cool, man. All right, before we go, talk about what you do for people and where people can learn more about you, and if they wanted you to do this for them, where they would go.
Absolutely. So my website is essenceofemail.com, and you can go on the site and you'll see all the information there. You can contact me, or if you want to just shoot me an email at x@essenceofemail.com. I respond to my emails. And essentially what we do is we take all this plus much, much more, and we can take your email marketing program from ground zero all the way up to the Rolls Royce. And it takes time, but if this is something you've been wanting to do, you have your list, you've been in e-commerce for a while, we can either start from scratch, or if you've even sent some emails in the past, but more sporadically, we can definitely tune up that program and take it to the next level.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. Well, I'll have links to your site and your email address in the show notes at dropdeadcopy.com. Thanks for coming on the show to talk about e-commerce email marketing X.
Thanks for having me, John.
All right. Cheers. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you want to discover more insider tips, tricks, and secrets about driving sales with email marketing, sign up for daily email tips from the autoresponder guy. Go to dropdeadcopy.com/podcast. Sign up, confirm your email address, and I'll send you daily emails on how to improve your email marketing and make more sales via email. You'll find out why open rates don't matter and the 7-letter word that underlies all effective marketing and much more.
The editing and production of this podcast were provided by Authority Engine. Learn more at authorityengine.com.